My name is Devin McLaughlin. I'm the Director of Professional Services for PathLock Native ABAP tools. And my team is responsible for the global implementation of the software and the services. So I've been working with SAP and SAP security for 27 years. So I'm still very passionate about this topic, and I'll be doing one in a couple of weeks that Stephanie will advertise, and so hope you can join me for that role redesign webinar coming up. So today we are going to talk about the inefficiencies in the SOD analysis and that process. So we'll go through an overview of those. We'll talk about the SOD rule sets, custom versus out of the box, incorporating organizational values into your analysis, mitigating risks with firefighter, and then lastly, can do versus did do. So as an overview, there are many inefficiencies built into most SAP segregation of duties processes, and probably outside of SAP, but today we're talking about SAP. So there is a lot of lost business productivity. Access requests take longer to complete, so the business users don't get their access when they need it. They're not able to do their job. So that's what we mean by lost business productivity. There are higher support costs involved. So the more SOD violations you have, the stricter your rules are, the more people you need to support that, both from a security perspective, making role changes, adjusting access, but then also reviewing the SOD conflicts, and then after the fact, if you happen to grant conflicts, then the mitigating controls process. So again, with these inefficiencies, you're led to significantly higher support costs. And then also you end up with security risks as well. So people take shortcuts and only do partial work. Their roles aren't good. So you end up with allowing security risks to exist just for the sake of trying to compensate for these inefficiencies. And with these inefficiencies, it's real money that we're costing organizations. But and it's really hard to measure it all, though. Again, I talk about the lost business productivity. If an accountant has to wait a new accountant has to wait 3 or 4 days, actually not even a new accountant, somebody who's already got access, he needs access to do something well. It's creating an SOD, that role he needs is causing an SOD conflict. Maybe he's not actually requesting it. So someone's got to look at it. It's going to get flagged. And is what he's trying to do a conflict? Maybe it's not. Can we grant it and mitigate it? Maybe we need to change a role because of it. Well, meanwhile, the accountant is waiting to do his work and it's not happening. So he's twiddling his thumbs and he's got something important to do and he can't do it. So him waiting 3 or 4 or 5 extra days is costing the business money. Now, it's not causing the security team money, it's costing the business money. So and it's really hard to measure that, but that doesn't make it an issue even if you can't measure it. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about these inefficiencies, examples of them, and then solutions that we've got here at PathLock or just in general that can be used to lessen the impact of the inefficiencies. There's no way to get rid of them all, but the processes can certainly be tighter. So the first one we're going to talk about is the SOD rule sets. So every tool, SAP's tool, our competitors' tools, they all come with an SOD rule set out of the box that you can implement. And ours are no different. Now, right now, about half our customers are using the rule sets as they come out of the box. They're making no changes to them, or maybe minimal changes, but basically they're using what we have out of the box. Now, we spend a lot of time on our rule set, updating it, reviewing it for new versions of SAP with Fiori, what have you. So we're pretty happy with it. And obviously our customers that are using it are getting audited. So The big audit firms are looking at it, letting us know then if there are any problems. So it's a pretty tight rule set. But on the other hand, there are problems with it. And whether it's the custom transactions, so some companies, some organizations, as you're implementing SAP and using SAP, you're building a lot of custom transaction codes. Sometimes it's a copy of an existing SAP transaction code. Sometimes they're purely custom. Either way, if they're SOD relevant, they need to be in your rule set, your SOD rule set. And obviously, the custom transactions are not included out of the box because nobody knows what they are, what you've got, what they're doing. But if you don't add the custom transactions to your rule set, the custom SOD relevant transactions, then your roles are going to have risks that nobody's going to know about and you won't be tracking. So it's important to do, at the very least, customize your rule set for that. And that'll, again, this is about getting rid of these inefficiencies and problems in your rule set. The other thing is to look at the criticality of each risk. Some companies, I've got one customer, when they're provisioning access, they only look at the critical and the high risks. They don't have time to look at the lows and mediums. So making sure that each rule in your rule set, each of the risks is correctly categorized. So if you say something's a high risk, if by default we say it's a high risk, but for you it's a low risk, then if you're doing like that one customer and you're looking at the criticals and highs, then this one's going to pop every time. And then through the workflow process, that request gets routed to another team to evaluate. Do you give the access? Do you not give the access? What kind of mitigating control can we put into place? And so this is delaying the access request, of course, but it's also, from a support perspective, then you're taking extra time to look at it. If you had simply reviewed your rule set up front and said, no, this one for us is not high, it's a low. So that would have avoided that piece of work on that request. So going through the rule set and saying, yeah, for us, this is critical. This one's by default is a high, but we think it's a medium. If you do that for all of it, then it's going to reduce the overall level of effort for your organization because it's more tuned. The rule set is more tuned to how you operate. The other thing about the rule set is eliminating false positives. And by that, I mean the risks are reported only when they need to be reported. So if something by default in the rule set we flag and it's not an issue at all for you guys, then adjusting the rule set so that stuff doesn't show up, not just saying it's a low risk, but removing it entirely will keep that from popping up, keep your team from having to review it, analyze it every time it happens. And then with those access requests, certainly then the business can be more productive and do their things because we're not looking at it. So there are a lot of false positives that can happen with the rule set. So one of the dilemmas we've run across from a default rule set is what do you include? So a particular transaction may look at 5 security authorization objects, but we think only 2 of them are relevant and are important, and so we've only got 2 in the rule. So if you've got the activity of 01 or 02, and then whatever the other thing is. But we had a situation not that long ago where a customer said, no, we need to look at 4 of those security objects, not just the 2. All right, so again, they're customizing their rule set, adding in those 2 extra things. Well, that removed, I don't know how many items from being reported. So we err on the side of showing more, so as opposed to showing less. So that's why we put it at those 2 objects. But for this particular customer, they wanted to see less. They were positive. They're sure they needed to see less. And so they added in those 2 extra objects. So it's great. This particular scenario is great because they're taking the time to, again, take a look at the rule set, make sure it meets their exact needs. And that's the thing about it. The default is okay, but you need to, it helps if you actually go through and customize it. So that is our recommendation. We work with customers for our SOD tool. In this case, on the last line is separations enforcer. So we recommend that customers take the time to go through it. Yeah, let's get it implemented with the default rule set, but then come back and take a look at it and review it and make sure that it's actually doing what you want. And this is especially true with the movement to or migration to S/4HANA. There are so many new transactions, brand new transactions that have been replaced, like from SU01 over to business partners. So, and then all, of course, there are new authorization objects, and then Fiori applications. Sometimes having 2 Fiori applications or tiles is going to cause an SOD conflict. So having that, and a lot of companies, a lot of organizations are using Fiori for the first time when they move to S4, even though it's been around. So reviewing your rule set as part of the migration to S4 is an important thing. And separations enforcer, this Pathlock native ABAP tool, includes some functionality that can help speed that along for you. All right, the next topic for getting these inefficiencies out of your analysis is by incorporating organizational values into them. So most SOD rule sets are pretty straightforward. You have access to create an accounts payable vendor. You've got access to post an accounts payable invoice. It's a conflict. But for a lot of companies, you've got multiple company codes. So if you were technically creating a vendor, an AP vendor on one company code, but you were posting an invoice, you had access to post an invoice on another company code, that's not a conflict. It's not a real conflict. Now, it's going to show up in every SOD analysis, though, because the normal rule sets don't take a look at your org values, company codes, plans, that stuff. And they don't do it because it's a huge burden to go through your rule set and add in all the company codes. So company code A plus company code B is a violation or what have you. So it's a really cumbersome and difficult process. So nobody does it. And org values change over time. You're always adding a new company code, a new plan, a new warehouse, whatever it is. So those things change, and then you've got, every time they do, you got to go through and update your rule set. And that's a real hassle. So what we did with Pathlock's separations enforcer is build some functionality called dynamic matrix. And it allows you to put in your org values, and it pulls it into your rule set easily. Takes a couple of weeks to set up, but once it's in place, you're off to the races. So for those customers that have a lot of these org values, again, company codes, plants, warehouses, whatever, our recommendation is that you do implement this. And certainly for a lot of organizations, they're pretty small. You don't have many company codes. Everything, I mean, whether you may be a big company, but only 1 or 2 company codes, so this is really not an issue. But certainly for those with a big organization, a lot of organizational values, pulling this into your rule set will help get rid of a lot of inefficiencies. It'll let you be more, again, I was going to say more efficient, but I mean, you're not stopping somebody from getting access when it's really not a problem. I mean, if you truly, in my example with accounts payable, You've got access to one company code to create the vendors, another company code for the invoices. That's not an SOD violation. Your access request should never be questioned, should never be stopped, should never require the extra scrutiny. But certainly without this, you do. It is stopped. It does have the extra scrutiny. It takes extra time to get your access, and more people are needed to run this whole process. So again, this is one of these inefficiencies. This one's not for everybody, but if you've got org values, then you absolutely need to look at this opportunity. The next one, the third one, is mitigating risk with firefighters. So I think I mentioned at the beginning, I've been doing this for 27 years. So I've seen a lot has changed over time. But when this emergency access or firefighter tools came into being initially, one of the big things was we can resolve your SOD conflicts with this tool. You just have to either give like basis, give them access in firefighter to one side of the conflict. They have the other side of the conflict on their regular ID, like opening up a system for modifications. And so they don't do it very often. So yeah, they can check out a firefighter. But if you give them the access plus whatever else it is, it's going to be a conflict every time. But opening the system for modification, if you put that on firefighter, then they check it out every time. Whoever, system owner, whoever approves that request, knows they're doing it, knows they're supposed to do it. So that's helps protect the system anyway. And then this eliminates this SOD conflict. But you've got the monitoring in place, so that's not a big deal. So this approach using firefighter, emergency access, privileged access management, whatever you want to call it, is still an effective way to deal with SOD violations. And it makes the process more efficient. Requests are able to be processed more quickly because of this. So it's not, again, this has fallen out of favor. People don't do this as much as they did, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, but it's still effective. And my personal, I'm a practical guy. If there's a solution that'll solve a problem and it's easy, I'm going to do it. Even if it's not normally done or done rarely, I'm going to do whatever the solution is that gets this problem taken care of. And I've run into a few customers, defense contractors and pharma, that they're just never going to, they're in such a regulated industries that they just can't give out SOD conflicts, SOD violations. And that would be wonderful. But for most organizations, you have to. You can't hire enough people. You can't split the functions. Maybe you've got 20 plants and you've got an accountant at each plant, and they got to do everything at that plant. And so there may be conflicts all over the place, and you just can't avoid it. Well, again, using firefighter is a way to at least monitor it, mitigate it, so that it's not as risky a situation as it would have been normally. So Pathlock has a tool, emergency repair, that we use, and this is one of those use cases that when I'm implementing the software, this is one of those things that I suggest people do. It's just, again, too simple not to recommend it. So, so if you haven't thought about using your firefighter tool this way, an emergency repair, SAP's tool, it really doesn't matter. They're all doing the same thing. This approach will work and make your process, overall SOD analysis process, more efficient. And then the last item that I wanted to talk about today is the can do versus did do. So these are some newish terms, and we use them a lot here at Pathlock and as we talk with our customers. But the traditional SOD analysis tools, ours, SAP's, whatever, are what we call can do. You've got the access to do it, so you can do it. Now you can have, even if you had SAP All, That doesn't mean you're going out and actually doing things. You've got the ability to do it. And so I don't know now what it is, but the last time I remember, if you had SAP all, you and the basic SOD rule set, you're going to end up with 100,000 violations for each person that had SAP all. And again, maybe it's changed a little bit. It's a little old information, but you still got a lot. With SAP all, you can do a lot of things. So that's what these tools are. They're can do. The flip side of it are the did do tools. What did you actually do? Regardless of your access, what did you actually do? Did you create an accounts payable vendor and then post an invoice to that vendor that you created? Regardless, and obviously they would be on the same company code. Well, that's really what you want to know. And as we talked in the last section, it would be great if you didn't give people SOD violations, but almost everybody does. Almost everybody's forced to. So how can you, so if you're giving everybody these can-do violations, you're letting them have the access to do things, then how can you protect yourself? Again, it would be great if you could never do it, if you said, we're never going to give out SOD violations. But again, unless you're in a highly regulated industry, you're going to. So what we've done is Pathlock native ABAP actually has two tools, automated mitigation and access violation management risk analysis, or AVMRA. So both of those tools, and there are different use cases for them, but they're still accomplishing the same thing. So it's tracking, monitoring the execution of SOD violations. So people actually did do something inappropriate or something worth investigating. So, and I've already touched on a few things on this slide, but it's the, again, it's the people actually doing things that these tools are monitoring. Some mitigating controls, and ultimately these are mitigating controls. You're saying we're going to give you the access, but in some cases with the mitigating control, maybe you run a report, you say to one of your accountants in the home office, you've got 10 plants, an accountant in each plant with SOD violations. So you've got somebody in the home office that's running a report every month, looking to see, they'll run 2 reports. Did the person do this and did they do this? They probably actually bring them into Excel and do a VLOOKUP or whatever, looking for cases on both report that were executed by a single person. Okay, for a particular situation, particular conflict, that may take 5 to 10 minutes to do once a month. So that's pretty simple. You run a report, you validate it, make sure nobody executed an SOD conflict. Others, you may have tens of thousands of people that are doing things and millions of transactions that have to be reviewed. And so trying to pull that down into Excel and do all of this, and you're a big organization, so now you've got to do that 50 times, 100 times, and you just don't have the manpower for that. That's the situation where these did do tools, AVMRA or automated mitigation AM, come in. So they provide that automation. So instead of your people having to do it, the automation is set up that says, look at this table, look at this table, we've got a rule, and when you see the violation, alert somebody. And an email goes out to the person, or it shows up in their SAP inbox, and they can see, yep, somebody actually did something this month. I need to check it out. So then you can log in. Was it appropriate? Did they include enough documentation? Maybe you've got to call them up and say, hey, what did you do and why did you do it? Send me your supporting documentation. Okay, this is okay. It's an SOD conflict, but there's nothing inappropriate about it. And the tool you mark it as good. And when the auditors come in, they can take a look at it. There's a good audit trail. And I think I've got that on the next slide. So you've got this audit trail that allows the auditors, internal, external auditors, to see what's going on. They're not having to look through Excel. They're not having to look through reports. They're not having to look through somebody a file that you run you print out a report and put it in a file. None of that. It's all right there in the tool. So from an overall SOD analysis process, these did-do tools can really increase the efficiency. They increase the speed. They increase the accuracy. You're not having to depend on somebody executing a report, downloading it into Excel. Did they format it correctly when it came into Excel? Did they lose something, a leading zero or whatever? The tool does it all for you. So you end up with an overall process that's more efficient. And certainly it takes effort to implement, and you wouldn't want to implement this for an easy process. Again, running a report in 5 minutes once a month, boom, boom, you look at it. There's no reason to automate that. That's too simple. But there are going to be a lot of things out there that are not simple, that people are not doing. And this automation for the did-do controls can help make this process significantly more efficient. So it just, again, depends on your situation, the size of your organization, what controls you care about, what have you. So to wrap it up, most, I would dare say all, SOD analysis processes are inefficient, and they're just built that way. And these inefficiencies are costing time and money to your organization. But you can tackle them. Now, I talked about 4 different ways that we listed out here, but there are a lot more. And I could have spoken about this topic for hours and hours, and you would have gotten tired of it, and nobody wants to hear me talking that much. So we just tried to condense it down to the biggest, most important things that you could do. So customizing your SOD rule set, incorporating the custom transactions that are SOD relevant, updating your rule set for the migration to S/4HANA, incorporating organizational values, if you've got a lot of them, into your rule set so that you're only seeing actual SOD violations, not other things, not these false positives. Utilizing your emergency access tool to mitigate these conflicts where possible. Again, not a popular way to use firefighter tools today, but extremely effective. And then lastly, it's incorporating did-do tools into your mitigating control process so that when you do find issues, you're catching them. And we've frankly, and I didn't mention this earlier, but if you've got really strong did-do controls in place, you can be a little more lenient on who's got the access. Because it doesn't matter if they have the access if you know they did it or you know they didn't do it. No harm, no foul if they didn't do it, if they didn't use that access for something inappropriate. But if they happen to, whether it's valid or invalid use, you're going to know about it and you can follow up on it. So the did-do tools can really reduce a bunch of the inefficiencies built into your tool. So, all right. So Q&A time. I don't know if we've got any questions. Stephanie?
Yeah, thank you, Devin. Thank you for that presentation. Again, if you do have any questions, please add them now into the questions box. And while we wait for those to come in, I just wanted to say that if you do have any questions later, but you don't have them now, you can just email us at info@pathlock.com, and we would be happy to answer any and all questions that you have. I don't think we have any questions at the moment. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you at future webinar events.